Okay, so we're going to be practicing doing these trig identities. So we're proving, okay? So in this first example, okay, there's a couple of ways of doing this. First of all, if you have some of your identities written down on your formula chart, that would help a lot. Like there's an identity that says sine x, and these were in the notes, is cosine x times tangent x. So basically this right here is sine x over cosecant x. Okay? And then dividing sine by cosecant is the same thing as multiplying by its reciprocal, which gives us sine x times sine x, which is sine squared x. So that's one way of doing it. Now, if you don't have this identity written down, that means you're going to have to do it a little differently. So the other way of doing it is changing tangent to sine over cosine x first, and then you'd end up dividing out your cosine, which would have left you with sine x over cosecant x, which of course basically gets you right to there. So you'd have to do it in one more step. Okay? Or a different way would be to do it all together, would be first changing it to this by doing the cosecant dividing by cosecant, the same thing as multiplying by sine, but then you'd still have to change this to sine x over cosine x. That still divides out, which leaves you again with sine times sine, which is sine squared. So there's three different ways of using your trig identities or algebra to get to the same answer. Okay? All right, the second one. Again, one of the first things I always ask my kids to do is to do any kind of algebra. So in this one, I'm going to start by distributing it in. So cosecant times cosecant is cosecant squared theta minus cosecant theta sine theta, like that. And then anything multiplied by its reciprocal is 1. So cosecant squared theta, minus 1. And that's one of our Pythagorean identities, which is cotangent squared. And that's the answer we're looking for. Okay. All right. So let's look at number 3. So right off the bat, just like we had in the previous example, I see sine times cosecant. And sine times cosecant, anything multiplied by its reciprocal is 1. Plus, and I'm going to do this part, dividing by secant is the same thing as multiplying by its reciprocal, which is cosine. So again, I have tangent times cosine, which is sine x. And that's what I'm looking for. Okay? So that's the other thing. Once you start using these more often, when you see tangent times cosine now, you should know that that is sine. Okay? All right, number 4. So this one, again, one of the things that I tell my kids to do is, of course, algebra first. So I'm going to distribute here first. So I'm going to get sine squared x plus sine squared x cotangent squared x minus 1. Okay? And then sine times cotangent. So I'm going to change cotangent to its cosine squared over sine squared minus 1. Sine divides out with sine, which leaves me with sine squared x plus cosine squared x minus 1. And this right here is one of my Pythagorean identities, and it equals 1. So we end up with 1 minus 1, which is 0, which is what we're looking for. Okay? So be careful, because, for instance, I could have, if I wanted to, at the very beginning, gone over here and changed this sign to 1 minus cosine squared. But then I would have had to sit here and I would have had to FOIL out these two things. You would have ended up getting basically to this point here, but it would have taken you a lot longer. Okay? So there are going to be different ways of doing it, but some of them are just going to be longer than others. Okay? And it doesn't make it wrong, it just means that you've got more steps that you're going to have to do.